Recently, I put out a couple of tweets talking about Gundam games, and they sparked some really good conversations about the quality of the games we get and what factors into why they succeed or fail. In this video, I want to delve into my thoughts in a little more detail, as well as bring up some of the points that I came across in the replies, because many people made some very valuable contributions regardless of whether they agree with me or not. The first tweet was in response to a tweet by Delty, who has a pretty large following, who said that Gundam Breaker 3 was the only good Gundam game in recent years. I said that I also think Breaker 3 was great, but I simply couldn't agree with his point that it was the only good Gundam game that came out recently. As examples, I brought up Maxi Boost On, SD Gundam Battle Alliance, G-Generation Cross Rays, and Gundam Battle Operation Code Fairy, which all came out in the last 4 years and I thought were all fun experiences. This led to me following up with another separate tweet where I said, and I'm going to read this word for word, "One day we're going to have a conversation about why Gundam fans are a big reason Gundam games fail. Y'all don't support games that don't fit your exact definition of what a Gundam game should be, and that reflects badly in Bandai's eyes." Now, I'm not here to take back what I said because I stand by it, but some people did take certain parts of that tweet the wrong way, so I'm going to expand on my thoughts here. My wording probably could have been clearer, but there's only so much you can do within Twitter's character limit, and Lord knows I'm not paying for Twitter Blue. The first misconception I saw was people interpreting me saying a big reason as the only reason. Obviously, this is not the case. Whether Gundam games live or die is a shared responsibility between both us and Bandai. And this leads into the second point where a lot of people seem to think that by support games, I meant be a Bandai shill and just blindly buy whatever they put out, which I do not recommend. Anyone who knows me knows that I am not the biggest fan of capitalism and how big corporations take advantage of it, but that's a different conversation. So I posted a follow-up in the thread clarifying that of course Bandai has the responsibility to make good games that people want to play, and you should not just buy whatever they release because it has Gundam in the title. But I believe that fans need to be more open to giving different types of games a chance. What do I mean when I say being open? I find that when it comes to Gundam fans in particular, a lot of people tend to be held back by personal biases and as a result aren't willing to give certain games the time of day. Does this mean that you should be buying every game just to try it out? No, because that's just blind consumerism. I'm talking about a step before that. Some people will refuse to even look into what a game is all about because in their mind they've already written it off based on the genre or some other factor. So when I talk about being open, I'm really talking about being willing to say to yourself, let me check out a stream or a YouTube video for this game to see if it's something I might be interested in. That's it. Now you might be thinking to yourself, of course people do that, they don't just write games off based on limited information. Trust me, I first started my Instagram page 10 years ago, so I see these people time and time again. I cannot tell you how many people I've come across that will immediately trash talk a Gundam game just because it features SDs or because it's not a hyper-realistic mech simulator. Many people that did disagree with me brought up in the replies things like, I know what I like, if I don't like X genre or I don't like the SD style, why would I consider buying one of those games? I'm not discrediting that. I don't like X genre is a perfectly valid argument. However, you also need to recognize the fact that video game genres are very broad and the definition of what a game in a specific genre looks like is not always set in stone. Here are a couple of examples to show you what I mean. Gundam Extreme Versus. You guys know me at this point, I'm an absolute shill for this series. In broad terms, the X Versus series falls under the genre of fighting games. Someone who has the personal bias of I don't like fighting games might therefore immediately dismiss it and not bother checking it out to see what the gameplay looks like. This bias is probably rooted in traditional fighting games like Street Fighter or Tekken, whereas Gundam X Versus is a 2v2 arena fighter. The gameplay isn't the same at all. This is what I mean when I say genres have nuance to them, so you can't always make a one-to-one comparison between two games. Let's take a look at SD Gundam Battle Alliance next. If someone's personal bias is I don't like SD games, they probably wrote this off as soon as they saw the title. But let's say hypothetically this person also loved the Dynasty Warriors Gundam games back in the day, which a lot of people are big fans of. If you think about it, the gameplay of Battle Alliance and those games is pretty similar. So they would potentially be robbing themselves of an experience that reminded them of games they loved because they weren't willing to give it a chance. Again, it's not about buying games you don't like in hopes that Bandai will put out something that you do, it's about being open-minded. The other important responsibility of us as fans is giving constructive feedback. Just like any other franchise, Bandai looks for player feedback on the games they put out to help them make decisions for those games or for the development of future games. Giving your feedback in a constructive way makes a big difference in whether or not your opinion will be taken seriously. Like I said, for the most part, even the people that disagreed with me did so by logically explaining why they do and what they think Bandai needs to do better. But on the flip side, there was a small minority that would just say things like, maybe if Bandai made better games, people would play them. Like, thanks, great insight. Saying just make better games, forehead, is not useful. You haven't explained which games you dislike, why you dislike them, or what you would like to see in future games. How are they supposed to take what you've said and do something with it in any meaningful way? Imagine if you went into work and your boss said to you, wow, you suck at this job, you always screw up, how are you this dumb? Would you still want to come to work? Would you still value your boss's opinion? Probably not. Take Gun Evo for example. Since the shutdown announcement, it's been hit with tons of negative feedback. Lots of people are frustrated with it, and rightfully so, but the difference again is how that frustration is expressed. Saying, this game sucked, and saying, this game had potential but it was overly monetized and lacked ways to acquire new suits as a free-to-play player are two different things. The latter is actionable feedback, the former is just noise. Another thing that I see really often is people misplacing their anger when it comes to giving their feedback. A lot of people that are unsatisfied with a game tend to direct their frustrations at the devs. And those people who do just spread negative noise often go as far as to hurl insults at the devs and claim that they don't care about the game, they're just in it for the money, blah blah blah. I think more people need to think critically about this. Game development is incredibly difficult. It takes a lot of time, costs a lot of money, and the industry is well known for the exploitation and overworking of its employees. Game devs don't go into game development to make a bad game, they do it because they love it. You can be upset about things like balance changes all you want, but devs don't purposely balance things poorly to piss off their player bases. That just makes no sense. And when it comes to the issues that people complain about the most when it comes to Gundam games, things like over-monetization and lack of marketing, the devs aren't making those decisions. The people that make those decisions are the ones in upper management that you've never even heard of. So don't give the devs hell based on decisions that are out of their control. Direct your frustration where it should go, which is at the top. Now of course, the responsibility can't only be on fans, so let's also talk about the things that are out of our control, in other words, on Bandai's end. The challenge for the longest time has always been getting Bandai to release games worldwide and localize them. When I was a kid, my grandpa used to go back home to Hong Kong a couple times a year and he would bring me back PS2 or PSP Gundam games, and that was my way of importing them. Many other Gundam fans who are in their 20s or 30s have similar stories of importing Gundam games, and in those days a lot of them weren't localized. I specifically remember playing the old Gundam Battle or G-Generation games and just having to figure out the menus and learn to recognize certain combinations of Japanese characters to remember which option did what. This issue has definitely improved over the years, but it still exists. Some games that are translated and released worldwide like Cross Race still have localization errors, and some don't make it out of Japan at all, like the Urder Hunt mobile game that's being shut down. At the end of the day, Bandai's main focus will always be Japan, and there really isn't much we can do about that. It's the birthplace of the franchise, and Gundam is ingrained in Japan's media culture just like how superheroes like Spider-Man are ingrained in North America's media culture. This is why I say it's so important for us to at least be open to checking out the games that they do release outside Japan, because that support lets them know that we're a market worth catering to. But if we do support these releases, we've done our job. It's then Bandai's responsibility to ensure that they release high quality games that people want to play and that they market them well. It is still important for us to have realistic expectations, of course. I'm gonna come back to Gun Evo again because it's a big topic of conversation right now. A lot of people say things like, well, if Bandai just released suits more often, then the game would feel more fresh and maybe players wouldn't have dropped off so quickly. I'm willing to bet that the reason they didn't do that, aside from the one time in Season 3 that they dropped both Hyperion and Heavy Arms, is that it's not always feasible due to development cycles. That being said, I'm going to echo Datto here, who's one of my favorite Destiny 2 content creators. While it's beneficial to educate yourself on the difficulties of game development so that you can understand why certain things happen, as the consumer, it's not your job to care. Bandai may face a bunch of different challenges when it comes to making games, but as the people that play them, it's not our job to sympathize with that because what matters to us is the final product. While I believe some great Gundam games have come out in the last few years, I also believe they would have been more successful under different circumstances. I believe that if Emban had received as much marketing for its PS4 port as Gun Evo did for its launch, that the game would have been vastly more successful and more people would have tried it out. I believe that if Gun Evo had less aggressive monetization policies and had more reliable ways to unlock suits, that would have helped with negative player sentiment. But just because a game gets shut down or doesn't live up to its potential doesn't mean that Bandai can't learn from those failures. Again, it's our responsibility to share our criticisms and feedback in a constructive way, but after that, the onus is on Bandai to take that and implement it towards future releases. If they continue to make the same mistakes, then of course the community will begin to lose faith. I think the biggest challenge that we face right now is that we, the community, and Bandai are in sort of a negative feedback loop. Games are released that either aren't marketed well enough or have issues, so players aren't engaging as much with those games, and in turn Bandai then thinks that it's not worth it to spend a lot on marketing or make new games because there's not enough demand. At the end of the day, we can't control what Bandai does, so the most we can do as a community is be open to the games they put out and share our feedback and criticisms in a constructive way. After that, it's out of our hands. We can only hope that they listen and deliver products that provide value to us as gamers and supporters of the franchise. Let me know your thoughts on this whole discussion in the comments. Whether you agree with me or disagree with me doesn't matter. I'm interested in both sides, again, as long as the conversation is civil. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a positive rating to help me in my boss battle against the algorithm. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you guys in the next one.